There's something most people don't realize about belief. Belief is not just an opinion, it's not just positive thinking, it's not just religion, spirituality, or mindset work. Belief is one of the most powerful forces shaping human reality. It influences the body, it influences emotions, it influences perception, behavior, identity, relationships, opportunities, health, confidence, and fear, the way people experience life itself. And what's fascinating is that science and spirituality, two things people often separate completely, both point toward the same truth in different ways. What the mind repeatedly accepts as true begins shaping reality internally and externally. Not always instantly, not magically in the simplistic way social media sometimes presents it, but deeply, consistently, biologically, emotionally, energetically, psychologically, and spiritually. And honestly, once you begin understanding the power of belief, you start seeing life completely different. You begin realizing that many people are not living from conscious choice. They're living from unconscious beliefs they absorbed years ago. Beliefs about who they are, what they deserve, what's possible for them, what love actually feels like, whether success is safe, whether life is supportive or hostile, whether they are capable or whether they matter. And the thing about beliefs is that people often mistake them for facts. But beliefs are usually interpretations reinforced through repetition and emotional experience. And that's why two people can live through similar circumstances and develop completely different realities afterward. One person experiences hardship and develops resilience, while another experiences hardship and develops fear. One person can experience rejection and becomes more self aware, while another can experience rejection and they begin believing they are fundamentally unworthy. The experience matters, but meaning attached to the experience matters just as much. And those meanings become beliefs. Then beliefs become identity. Then identity begins shaping reality. And this starts much earlier in life than most people realize. A child is constantly absorbing information from the environment, not only through words, but through emotional atmosphere, through observation, through repetition, through emotional experiences. Children are incredibly impressionable because the brain spends early developmental years in slower brainwave states, especially theta brainwave states, which are highly receptive and suggestible. And this means children absorb information almost like hypnosis. They absorb emotional truths before they develop strong analytical filters. So, if a child repeatedly experiences criticism, instability, emotional neglect, fear, or shame, or unpredictability in any way, they are conditioned. The mind begins forming beliefs. Beliefs like, I'm not enough, or I have to earn love. People leave me. I'm only valuable when I perform. Or even it's not safe to express myself, or success creates pressure, or even money causes stress, which is a huge one for most people. And these beliefs don't stay trapped in childhood. They continue operating beneath awareness into adulthood. That's why so many adults are living from emotional programs they never consciously chose. And one of the most important things to understand about belief is this: the mind is constantly looking for evidence to confirm what it already believes. So, this is where science becomes incredibly interesting. Psychology refers to this partly through concepts like confirmation bias and cognitive filtering, where the brain naturally notices information that supports existing beliefs while filtering out information that contradicts them. So if someone deeply believes they are unworthy, their mind unconsciously pays more attention to rejection than acceptance. They may overlook kindness, distrust compliments, hyperfocus on criticism, or interpret neutral situations negatively, not because reality objectively supports the belief, but because the mind is filtering reality through existing internal expectations. And this is one reason beliefs become self reinforcing. The mind collects evidence to maintain identity consistency, which means your beliefs don't only affect how you think, they affect what you perceive, and perception shapes experience. This is why two people can walk into the same room and experience completely different realities emotionally. One person feels judged, another feels welcomed. One feels anxious, and another feels inspired. And often, those emotional interpretations are being filtered through existing subconscious beliefs. Now, when people hear conversations like this, sometimes they immediately think this means everything is entirely self created or that difficult experiences are somehow someone's fault. And that's not what this means at all. Life is complex. People experience real pain, injustice, trauma, loss, and hardship. But what we do know scientifically and spiritually is that beliefs influence how human beings process reality, respond to reality, recover from reality, and ultimately create future experiences. One of the most famous examples of belief influencing the body is the placebo effect. And honestly, the placebo effect alone should completely change the way people think about the mind because it's quite fascinating. The placebo effect proves something actually quite extraordinary. The body can produce real physical changes based on belief. There have been countless medical studies where patients experienced measurable improvements after receiving placebo treatments, treatments with no active medical ingredients, simply because they believed they were receiving help. Pain decreased, symptoms improved, healing responses activated. And this isn't fake healing. The body is genuinely responding physiologically, which means belief alone can trigger biological changes. Now, think about how profound that actually is. If belief can positively influence the body physiologically, what happens when someone spends years believing they are unsafe, powerless, hopeless, broken, unwanted, or doomed? How much does chronic fear affect the nervous system? How much does chronic stress affect the immune system? How much does emotional hopelessness impact the body over time? Science increasingly shows the connection between mental states and physical health. Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Long term stress impacts sleep, digestion, inflammation, immune function, cardiovascular health, and emotional regulation. The mind and body are not separate systems, they are deeply interconnected. And spirituality has been pointing toward this connection for thousands of years. Many spiritual traditions teach that consciousness shapes experience, that inner reality influences outer reality, that energy follows attention, that thoughts and emotional states carry power. And while different traditions explain this differently, the underlying principle remains surprisingly similar. Human beings are not passive observers of reality. We participate in reality through consciousness. Now, this doesn't mean every single thought instantly manifests physically. And that's one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have developed around manifestation and spirituality. People become afraid of every negative thought, but the mind naturally produces thousands of thoughts every single day. The deeper influence comes from dominant beliefs, emotional patterns, identity structures, and repeated states of consciousness. What you repeatedly believe emotionally matters far more than random passing thoughts. And this is why repetition matters so much. The brain changes through repetition. This is called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural pathways based on repeated experiences, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, which means the brain is not fixed. Your patterns are not permanently locked. Your emotional responses can change. Your beliefs can change. Your identity can evolve. And honestly, that's one of the most hopeful things science has ever discovered. Because for so long, people believed personality and emotional patterns were mostly fixed, but the brain is adaptable. Human beings can rewire themselves through repeated intentional experience. And spirituality mirrors this idea in its own language. Many spiritual teachings discuss rebirth, awakening, transformation, renewing the mind, transcending limitation, or becoming conscious and shifting identity. Different words, same core principles. Humans are capable of amazing inner transformation, but transformation requires awareness because unconscious beliefs continue running automatically until they are questioned consciously. And this is why self awareness is so powerful. Most people never stop long enough to truly observe what they believe, not what they say they believe publicly, not what sounds inspiring, what they emotionally believe underneath everything. Because your true beliefs reveal themselves through patterns, through emotional reactions, through behaviors, through what you tolerate, what you expect, through what repeatedly shows up in your life. Someone may consciously say they want healthy love while subconsciously believing intimacy leads to abandonment. Someone may consciously desire success while subconsciously believing visibility creates danger or criticism. Someone may consciously want abundance while subconsciously associating money with stress and exhaustion. And these contradictions create internal resistance. The conscious mind wants one thing, the deeper belief system expects another. And the nervous system usually follows what feels familiar, not necessarily what feels good, what feels familiar. That's why people often create emotional patterns unconsciously. The mind seeks consistency with identity. And one of the most fascinating scientific studies connected to belief is something called the self fulfilling prophecy. Researchers found that expectations can significantly influence outcomes. One example often discussed is the Rosenthal effect, where teacher expectations affected student performance. When teachers believed certain students were more capable, those students often performed better academically over time. Not because intelligence magically changed overnight, but because expectations subtly changed interactions, encouragement, confidence, attention, and behavior. Belief influenced outcome. And this happens constantly in everyday life. The way people believe they'll be treated influences how they carry themselves socially. The way people believe opportunities work influences whether they pursue them. The way people believe relationships function influences attachment patterns. Beliefs influence behavior, and behavior influences outcome. And spiritually, this aligns with the idea that energy and expectation shape experience. Not always in immediate or linear ways, but consistently over time. What's even more interesting is how belief affects emotional resilience. People who believe healing is possible often persist longer. People who believe change is possible are more likely to take aligned action. People who believe they are powerless often stop trying entirely. This is why hopelessness becomes dangerous psychologically and spiritually. Because when belief collapses completely, motivation often collapses with it. And honestly, one of the biggest reasons people remain stuck is not lack of potential, it's lack of belief. Not surface level motivational belief, deep internal belief. Belief that change is possible, belief that they are capable, belief that life can improve, belief that they deserve more than survival mode. And I think this is where the spiritual side of belief becomes deeply important because spirituality at its healthiest restores possibility. It reconnects people to meaning, to trust, to intuition, to purpose and hope. Hope beyond immediate circumstances, and hope itself is powerful. And scientifically, hopeful people often regulate stress better, recover more effectively emotionally, and persist through challenges longer. And spiritually, hope keeps consciousness open instead of collapsing inward. And this doesn't mean ignoring reality. Real spirituality is not denial. It's not pretending pain doesn't exist. It's not bypassing grief or struggle. True spiritual growth allows honesty while still believing transformation is possible. And honestly, some of the most powerful beliefs people ever develop are formed during difficult seasons because adversity forces confrontation with identity. Who are you when things fall apart? What do you believe about yourself then? What do you believe about life then? Some people emerge from hardship believing life is permanently unsafe. Others emerge believing they are stronger than they realized. Same pain, different interpretation, different belief, different future trajectory. And this is why inner work matters so much. Because if beliefs shape perception, emotional patterns, behavior, nervous system responses, and identity, then changing your life requires examining your beliefs honestly, not shaming yourself for them, understanding them. A lot of people carry inherited beliefs without even realizing it. Family beliefs, cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, societal beliefs, generational fears, ideas about success, love, gender roles, worthiness, safety, scarcity. People inherit emotional realities from environments. And sometimes healing involves recognizing that certain beliefs were created for survival rather than truth. For example, someone raised in chaos may subconsciously believe peace is unfamiliar or unsafe. Someone raised around emotional suppression may struggle expressing vulnerability. Someone raised around financial instability may subconsciously panic even when financially stable. The nervous system remembers emotional environments and beliefs become embodied over time. This is why changing belief is not just intellectual, it's emotional, physical, energetic, and behavioral. You can consciously say, I deserve love, while your nervous system still braces for rejection. That's why repetition matters. The brain and body learn through repeated emotional experience. And this is where practices like visualization, meditation, affirmations, journaling, therapy, prayer, and mindfulness can become powerful when used intentionally. Not because they are magical shortcuts, but because they repeatedly introduce the mind and nervous system to new internal experiences. Visualization is fascinating scientifically because the brain often responds similarly to vivid imaged experiences and real experiences. Athletes have used visualization for decades to improve performance. Studies have shown mental rehearsal can strengthen neural pathways connected to physical skills. The brain responds to repeated imaged experience. Now, think about that spiritually. If the mind and nervous system repeatedly experience confidence, peace, abundance, safety, healing, or possibility internally, those states gradually become more familiar emotionally. And eventually, familiarity changes behavior. Behavior changes outcome. This is why identity work matters more than temporary motivation. Motivation fades, identity sustains. If someone identifies as unworthy, they may sabotage opportunities unconsciously. If someone identifies as capable, resilient, and deserving, they interact with reality differently. And one thing people rarely talk about enough is how belief influences energy, not energy in a vague, abstract way, but emotional energy, presence, the emotional atmosphere people carry. You can feel when someone believes in themselves versus when someone constantly doubts themselves. It changes body language, communication, decision making, boundaries, creativity, and risk taking. And people respond to that energy differently. This is why confidence often creates opportunities beyond technical skill alone, because belief changes embodiment. Now, spiritually, many traditions teach that human beings are energetic beings connected to larger fields of consciousness. Some people interpret this metaphysically, others psychologically, but either way, emotional states influence interaction with reality. Fear contracts, love expands, desperation repels, trust opens. And honestly, even from a purely psychological perspective, this makes sense. Someone operating from chronic fear behaves differently than someone operating from grounded confidence. And over time, those behaviors create different realities. Another powerful scientific concept connected to belief is expectancy theory. What people expect often influences performance and emotional outcomes. If someone expects failure constantly, anxiety increases, confidence decreases, performance often suffers, and opportunities may be avoided entirely. But when expectation shifts, behavior shifts. This doesn't mean blind delusion. It means internal expectation affects external participation. And spirituality often speaks about faith in very similar ways. Faith is not always certainty. Sometimes faith is willingness to move despite uncertainty, willingness to believe transformation is possible before visible evidence appears. And honestly, every major change in life usually requires belief before evidence fully arrives. Before someone builds a business, they have to believe they can. Before someone heals emotionally, they have to believe healing is possible. Before someone changes their life, they have to believe they are capable of becoming someone different. Belief precedes embodiment. And I think one of the most important parts of this conversation is understanding that belief is constantly being programmed through media, environment, relationships, conversations, social conditioning, personal experiences, repeated thoughts. The mind absorbs repetition, which means what you repeatedly expose yourself to matters deeply. If someone constantly consumes fear based information, negativity, hopelessness, or criticism, those emotional states begin shaping internal reality over time. The mind adapts to repeated exposure. And this is why protecting your mental environment matters, not from avoidance, but from awareness. What are you feeding your mind daily? What emotional states dominate your inner world? What beliefs are being reinforced repeatedly? Because eventually repetition becomes identity, and identity shapes reality. This is why some people can change dramatically when they change environments. New environments interrupts old reinforcement patterns. New relationships introduce different emotional experiences. New perspectives create cognitive flexibility, and eventually new beliefs begin forming. One thing I also think is really important is discussing the difference between blind positivity and grounded belief. Because sometimes people hear conversations about belief and think they need to suppress every negative emotion. But suppression is not transformation. Avoiding fear does not heal fear. Ignoring pain does not resolve pain. Real transformation requires honesty. You have to become aware of your fears before you can shift them. You have to recognize limiting beliefs before you can challenge them. And honestly, one of the most powerful questions a person can ask themselves is, what do I actually believe about myself? Not what sounds good, what feels emotionally true, because that answer often explains a lot. It explains relationship patterns, career patterns, emotional patterns, self sabotage, fear of visibility, fear of intimacy, fear of success, fear of failure. And once beliefs become visible, they become changeable. That's the empowering part. Awareness interrupts unconscious repetition. And this is where conscious reprogramming begins through repetition, through intentional thought, through emotional healing, through new experiences, through nervous system regulation, through challenging old assumptions, through surrounding yourself with people and environments that reinforce growth rather than limitation. And honestly, this process does take time. People often want instant transformation, but the brain learns through repetition. The nervous system changes through consistency. Beliefs change gradually as new evidence accumulates emotionally. And one of the biggest signs your beliefs are changing is that your emotional reactions begin changing. You stop expecting disaster constantly. You stop assuming rejection immediately. You stop abandoning yourself to maintain connection. You start feeling safer being authentic. You trust yourself more. You tolerate peace more easily. And eventually, your external life starts reflecting those internal changes because your choices shift, your standards shift, your energy shifts, your perception shifts. And over time, reality reorganizes around identity. Now, spiritually, many people call this alignment. Scientifically, you could explain parts of it through psychology, behavior, neuroplasticity, emotional regulation, or social dynamics, or even cognitive filtering. Different language, similar truth. Internal reality influences external experience. And honestly, I think the real power of belief is not just that belief can change circumstances, it's that belief can change people. A person who believes healing is possible behaves differently than someone who believes they are permanently broken. A person who believes they deserve healthy love behaves differently than someone who expects abandonment. A person who believes their life has purpose moves differently through the world than someone consumed entirely by hopelessness. Belief changes posture, presence, energy, choices, and ultimately destiny. Not because life becomes perfect, but because identity changes participation in reality. And maybe this is why protecting your mind matters so deeply, because your mind is not passive, it's creative, it's interpretive, it's powerful. The stories repeated internally become emotional realities over time. And one of the most beautiful things about human beings is that beliefs are not fixed forever. People can heal, people can evolve, people can awaken, people can completely transform the way they experience themselves and life. Science supports it, spirituality supports it, human experience supports it. And maybe that's the deeper message here. You are not trapped inside every belief you inherited. You are not permanently defined by fear. You are not doomed to repeat every emotional pattern forever. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates change. Change creates new identity, and new identity creates new reality. So, if there's one thing to really sit with after this conversation, maybe it's this: pay attention to what you repeatedly believe, because beliefs quietly become the architecture of life. They shape the way you love, the way you heal, the way you suffer, the way you grow, the way you see yourself, the way you experience the world. And sometimes the biggest transformation doesn't begin externally at all. It begins the moment someone finally realizes, maybe the mind is more powerful than I was ever taught. Maybe my beliefs are not absolute truth. Maybe healing is actually possible. Maybe change is actually possible. Maybe I am capable of becoming someone entirely different from the version of me created by fear. And once a person truly begins believing that, everything can start changing from the inside out. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Adina's Diary. Don't forget to follow so you never miss an episode every Wednesday at 9 a.m.